Hello 108 students, welcome to section 6.3 where we will tackle special factoring, and we've got a couple pages here, so we'll take on page 1 on this video. Okay, so I'm trying to give you a heads up here on factoring the difference of squares back in chapter 5. Remember what happened if you had x plus 3 and it was multiplied, that binomial was multiplied by its conjugate. Do you remember that phrase? When the signs were positive and negative, and we did FOIL, first, outer, inner, last, and we got x squared plus 3x minus 3x plus 9. What happened to the outer and the inner? You ended up with x squared minus 9. Okay, now we are factoring, so this special factoring, and you must recognize this, it's a little bit different. You're used to seeing a trinomial and you're used to the whole reverse FOIL from last section. Now the challenge is this: can you realize that you've got the square root of the first term minus the square root of a second term? That's what this interpretation is. If you get your book going here, in the purple boxes, they show these rules on page 333 here, 333, and I'm trying to get you to see English translation of what they do with the lawyerese writings of x's and y's. Okay, so ask yourself, do you have the square root of the first term? Can you take the square root of x squared? The answer is yes. There's the answer and there's the form for it. Do you have subtraction? You must have subtraction. It must be the difference. Do you have the square root of the second term? Yes. When you have that, then what you do is you go ahead, and I'm running out of room here, see if you can follow me. Drop the first square root, drop the minus, drop the second square root, and write the conjugate. Now it's like when I like introducing that word, now you can get that word in your mind and the verbal rule. Drop the first square root, drop the minus, drop the second square root, multiply by the binomial. Okay, there you go. Hopefully those words will help you out when you do these problems. So take a look at this example 1a. T squared minus 36. Do you have the first? Can you take the square root of the first term? Yes. Do you have subtraction? Yes. Can you take the square root of the second term? Yes. Okay, now I did it a little different in the notes, but the way I teach it in class, drop the first square root, drop the minus sign, drop the second square root, and write the conjugate. Now it doesn't matter which order you write the binomials, you'll get credit for them both ways. Okay, so that's the idea. You have to memorize that one. FOIL will not do you any good. Reverse FOIL will not do you. You must see that pattern. Okay, look at example C here. Okay, you practice. Do you have the square root of the first term? Yes. Do you have subtraction? Check. Do you have the square root of the second term? Yes. Okay, so my technique now, I put these, would be to go ahead and I would write 2a minus 8 first. I would drop the square root, drop the minus sign, drop the second root, then I would multiply by the conjugate. Okay, now paying attention to details in mathematics is important. You look at example F here and you say, do I have the square root of the first term? Yes. X squared, quantity squared. When you remember, you have inside outside exponents, you multiply them. So that's so fine. You've got the square root of x to the fourth is x squared. You've got the square root of 4 is 2. However, do you have subtraction? And the answer is no. Therefore, it's prime. You cannot factor it. If that would have been a minus sign, then we would have done it, similar to what we did above. Okay, so we're cruising here. That is the difference of squares. Objective number 2 is to get you to get comfortable with seeing the factor of a perfect square trinomial. Reverse FOIL will still work on here, so FLOY or reverse FOIL will work. This is pattern recognition here. If you can see a pattern where you've got the first term squared plus the first term times the second term doubled, and you've got the second term squared, you have in essence the first plus the second term times itself. Okay, now they like to tell you whenever you have the same base multiplied by itself, you can write it in this notation and use this exponent form. Okay, that's what they're trying to get you to see. We get later on in the course, we were going to look at this and take the square root on both sides, so you want to get comfortable using this. What I like about the way I teach this here, it doesn't matter whether you see if it's a plus or a minus. You're going to take this form and write this first square root, drop down the sign, drop down the second square root, and square it if you match the requirement for the middle term. It must be the double. Okay, so let's try some examples here. Is 4m squared plus 20m plus 25 a perfect square root? The reason you're asking this question is, again, you're trying to do reverse FOIL. You're trying to factor. You could use reverse FOIL, okay? But if you might see this pattern, it might save you a little bit of steps. Can you take the square root of the first term? Yes. Can you take the square root of the second term? Yes. If you multiply the first square root, which is 2m, times the second square root and double it, does that equal the middle term? It has to match. So now you've got 2m times 5 is 10m times 2 is 20m, and the answer is yes. Therefore, what you do is you drop the first square root, drop the second sign. I usually like to do this vertical. See if I can get this in here. 2m, drop the sign, drop the second square root, which is a 5 quantity squared. Okay, now let's just say you're like, yeah, whatever, but I want to use reverse FOIL. Okay, let's practice it. If you were going to do reverse FOIL, you'd give yourself two parentheses. What times what is 4m squared? You'd write 2m. Then you'd say what is 25, and you'd write what times what is 25. You would probably write plus 5 plus 5. You do the outer and the inner, and bingo, you'll come up with 20m, and your final answer would be 2m plus 5. Now the shorthand notation is to square it, and not leave it in factored, not leave it in two binomials being multiplied. Okay, so that is a perfect square trinomial. The more you use it, the more comfortable you get with it, the quicker and some shortcuts you use, and you'll be able to use that. So just remember, you do have the backup of reverse FOIL or Floyd to use. However, one last time, excuse me. One last time, when you have the difference of squares, you must see that pattern. Okay, so Mr. McHugh, we're going to go ahead and sign off here on page 1. I will be back to do page 2, talk about some more special factorings here for you, and I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, take care. Bye.